All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Campbell, Vice President of Content and Client Relationships with the Food Institute, and welcome to our webinar, How 2D Barcodes Could Revolutionize Retail. To start, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's webinar, starting with CBIZ. As of November 2024, Markham LLP is now a part of CBIZ. Their food and beverage services group has the perfect recipe of knowledge and service capabilities to help you stay flexible. Their professionals provide the accounting, tax, and consulting services so that you can concentrate on the growth of your business. And just as their service capabilities are diverse, so too are the types of food and beverage clients they serve, including distributors and manufacturers, importers, restaurant chains, processors and packaging, agribusinesses, and retailers. CBIZ is a leading professional services advisor to middle market businesses and organizations nationwide. With unmatched industry knowledge and expertise in accounting, tax, advisory, benefits, insurance, and technology, CBIZ delivers forward-thinking insights and actionable solutions to help you anticipate next steps and accelerate growth. And you can learn more at www.cbiz.com. We also thank GS1 US for their partnership today. GS1 US enables companies to power their supply chains to deliver safe, consistent, authentic, and trusted experiences. Best known as a source for UPC barcodes, GS1 is a not-for-profit global data standards organization that creates a common language for companies to identify, capture, and share trusted data that links their physical and digital supply chains. Millions of businesses around the world power commerce with GS1 standards. You can learn more at www.gs1us.org. Now let's take care of a little housekeeping. A recording of this webinar will be shared with all registrants and attendees. We will also be sharing the slide deck within that email. So please allow a few days for processing and keep an eye on your inbox for that email for the relevant materials. And finally, time permitting, we will be hosting a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A tab on the side of your screen. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We are happy to welcome back Waqqas Mahmood, Senior Director of Strategic IT Consulting for CBIZ. He has been in the innovation space for almost 2 decades, helping organizations architect their digital future. Waqqas believes in creating a culture of innovation that nurtures new technologies and media that promote powerful and engaging solutions. He has a strong background in digital product management, human-centered design, and business transformation. And we also welcome Ned Mears, Senior Director of Global Standards at GS1 US. Ned specializes in developing and applying data standards for supply chain visibility, product traceability, and process automation. He supports various industries by leveraging the GS1 system of standards and data capture technology applications. With a background in production systems design, variable data management, and digital printing technology, he employs his experience and innovative spirit to help make things work. And with that all out of the way, I'm going to hand it over to Waqqas to get today's presentation started. So over to you, Waqqas.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Ned, for being a co-presenter, and thanks the Food Institute to give us this opportunity to present. Very excited to share this topic with you. It's something that we as consumers and also technologists really are intrigued by it. So looking forward to kind of jumping into the presentation. I'll try to stay away from deep technology that's sort of like Ned's focus area. So I'll try to kind of bring it back up to what does this mean from a business standpoint and how we can kind of give you some guidance on managing some of the pain points that come with 2D barcode adoption. So starting off with our just kind of level setting some basic introduction or understanding of what 2D barcodes are. And as you can see, some of those images up on our slide here, QR codes or quick response codes are became very common during our COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of the products, a lot of the menus in restaurants, everything kind of went towards, hey, let's have a QR code for that. And now it's become such a common theme that even nowadays in restaurants, probably it's hard to find a physical menu because of that. And in some ways, we all have smartphones on us, so just capturing and scanning that QR code is really easy to follow. And kind of taking that same learning as what we're seeing in the food and beverage and retail industry, that these QR codes that are able to capture so much detail and information in the back, which we will get into in our webinar today, is just such a conducive piece of technology to use. Some other 2D barcodes examples are data matrix codes. They're usually used for traceability and product identification. And then the far right one is my favorite. When you see your Amazon packages, that's the code that's being used mostly for storage or shipping or logistics type of stuff. So just to kind of wanted to share some of the scheme of different 2D barcodes. Let's talk about why do we want to use 2D barcodes? And beside what Sunrise 2027 that's coming up, the big push behind this, I think there are definitely a lot of benefits that we see both from a consumer perspective and also from an enterprise business perspective as well. The increased data capacity in those 2D barcodes, those boxes and those lines, instead of just binary lines with certain widths, it actually in the back you're storing a lot of information about the product, information about the product shelf life, the traceability in terms of the ingredients, where it's coming from a supplier standpoint. Is this supplier A, supplier 2B? Is it a tier 1 product, a tier 2 product? All those pieces get in, kind of packaged in that data fields in the back. What it does is kind of talked about traceability. So you have better traceability of where this product originated from, what kind of components went in there, and then where it ends up in terms of the consumer's hands. What it does is, God forbid, if there is E. coli or some sort of breach like that, you're able to quickly trace back, based on, hey, what was the source of this product? And one client we worked with recently, they are a sugar manufacturer and refiner. So they actually really love 2D barcode technology because they can actually trace back the grain of that sugar, where it came from, what was the source, what was the lot number, what was the vessel this was on, eventually what was the field this crop was harvested from, right? So the traceability really plays a big role. It's space efficiency, obviously, for smaller products, every single inch of square footage, if you will, on that label is important. So maximizing that one space that you get for a QR code is important. Durability and error correction, so you're able to actually go into the data, make some changes, design any errors that you need to correct. Far simpler and easier than our traditional 1D barcodes, if you will. The last one is interactive consumer experience. So what we're seeing is a big shift in creating these 2D barcodes from a retailer, consumer, like business to consumer perspective. You can actually start to capture a lot of customer behaviors and personas when they click on that QR code and how they interact with it. So you can start to pick up on again, analytics about the customer behavior, what they like, what they kind of look for. Sometimes there are QR codes that are like, hey, click, scan this barcode to see some recipes. And as you can start to capture in the back, hey, this consumer clicked on this barcode for recipes and what kind of recipes they are interested in. And that kind of can start to curate certain experiences for a consumer when they go into that store again or buy that product again. Some applications that we are seeing for 2D barcodes, we named a few here, and as Chris mentioned, this document will be, or this deck will be shared after the webinar as well, so you'll have more information to go through. Product identification, traceability, and these is a big application, so we want to talk about that a bit, right? So as you are identifying these products, they actually really help with supply chain and logistics side of things. So you can actually see, especially in the food and beverage and retail industry, where what we call them live goods, right? So you need to have them temperature controlled. You need to kind of look for, hey, how long is it going to be on a truck or a trailer or a vessel? What would be the temperature control for that? What would that impact in terms of shelf life if it is exposed to sunlight for 3 hours while this is on this truck, which is not temperature controlled? All those pieces play a big role in supply chain and logistics that we feel like in part of the product identification traceability is really important, which actually plays into the next point really well, is inventory management. So if you have a hub and spoke model for your inventory control, so when product is reaching this hub, how long is it going to stay in the hub so it can be shipped to the spoke? And then from the spoke, how long is it going to stay there, or can it stay there for it to be shipped again to a customer location, to a store or restaurant, whichever product we're talking about. So that really helps supply chain and logistics and inventory control teams to manage all of that and plan all of that. That really helps with, again, forecasting versus actually how that's happening. Next point around is regulatory compliance. So, of course, FSMA piece is there. There's also the Sunrise 2027 piece that's coming up. So the regulatory compliance is a big component in terms of application for 2D barcodes. Expiration data management, as I mentioned, right? So that is part of the shelf life, or when the product is expired and needs to be disposed of, or it has to be considered as waste. So that really helps with the waste management side, which is part of Sunrise 2027's kind of component as well. We talked about consumer engagement. So all this engagement that we see through QR codes or any of the other 2D barcodes play a big role in understanding who our consumers are, what their behaviors are, what their buying personas are, or preferences are rather. And I think this is, again, a ton of good information that kind of plays back into like product development, into marketing, communication, campaign management, etc. In terms of counterfeit prevention, so what QR code does is actually this is where I would say it can help with a counterfeit, and it also become easy for hackers and cybersecurity, bad actors to actually take advantage of that. So sometimes there are QR codes out there that if you scan, it takes you to a certain website and you ask you to take certain steps. And again, so there's definitely cybersecurity pieces there as well. So what we are trying to see is that if a QR code is authenticated, is on the right product, it actually can really pertain and deter some of that counterfeit actions. Last piece here I would touch upon really quickly is we are becoming, as consumers, very cognizant of what we consume. And in that sense, of course, there's allergens and there's, religious reasons. It could be a kosher or halal or whatever, kind of perspective as well. So you want to know what ingredients are in that product. And gluten-free, for example, is a big one that, I think shaped or transformed this space, I think a decade or two ago, if you will, where it was such a big movement that now products are like, is it gluten-free? Is it vegan? All those pieces are very important. Again, a lot of that data can sit in a 2D barcode. We wanted to kind of highlight, and I know Ned also has some case studies around some of these examples. I mean, Nestle, we all consume a ton of different types of products from them, both on the food and beverage side. There's also medicinal products that Nestle produces, and they're using these 2D barcodes for detailed product information, traceability, data, interactions with the customers and consumers, and picking up those behaviors and pushing it back to the R&D and product development team and refining their product offering and markets. Nestle, especially on the medicinal side, there's a bunch of vitamins that they're coming up with, and especially in Europe, that's a huge market for them. And all these components, especially from a 2D barcode perspective, is helping those teams develop better products and better presence. And again, being on the medicinal side or even on the vitamin side or a nutrient side, there's a lot more regulatory compliance you have to adhere to. Kind of switching gears over from food and beverage manufacturing to more on the retail side, and this is where Walmart's example was a good one for us to share, that they have these 2D barcodes now for across their entire supply chain. Right. So what it does is gives them the better handle on forecasting versus actual versus reforecasting. All of that is actually done in a very much automated fashion, because 2D barcodes give them that information that they can put it back into a model and plan those scenarios out. Right. Scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, which one makes sense, and then what it does is it actually helps them refine the data a bit more. The last one here I would touch upon quickly is Whole Foods. So it's again a combination of food and beverage, combination of retail, kind of combined in Whole Foods. They're using that on packaging links, and again, Whole Foods' whole kind of mantra, their whole mission, if you will, is to provide clean, vegan, again non-vegan as well, but like very organic type of products and produces. So for them, QR code is a huge benefit to use, right? It provides that transparency. The customers also at Whole Foods tend to be very much focused on, hey, what am I consuming? What is this? What is the source and traceability of this product? What is the beside the caloric intake? What is the component underneath it? How much sodium and all that stuff? And I know some folks can be very much focused on that. Again, from a consumer experience perspective, you want to be able to capture that. And Whole Foods have been kind of doing that and pretty, I think, pretty helpful for consumers there. I would just kind of bring up really quickly, Chris, you mentioned as well earlier. So our CBIZ food and beverage services, we work with clients in similar situations where they're adopting new technologies, new solutions, or processes overall. There's also a component of mergers and acquisitions that we support for food and beverage services. So for us, it's a multifaceted technology. There's within the firm, we have services around accounting, tax, and again, consulting is where I sit and aligned to our food and beverage industry practice area. So please feel free to reach out once you have this deck and happy to indulge a bit more about our services that are kind of described over here as well. Won't spend too much time here. Give that. And from a geography standpoint, we're pretty much across the nation, and there are also teams offshore that we have in various countries and regions. If you guys ever need help, happy to help navigate through that. And I'll leave this slide up for a second, and I'll hand it over to Ned. But here's my contact info. I sit in our firm's DC office. That's my number and my email, so please feel free to reach out. Ned, over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I'll continue with a lot of that similar content, right? I'll be talking about 2D barcodes, some of those applications and use cases. But really what I'm going to dive into is a global program that GS1 is leading with the backing of a lot of major industry called Sunrise 2027, which is really focused around the retail use of 2D barcodes. So the way that I always like to sort of start this off is, by showing a little appreciation, let's say, to some of the legacy technology that really led to advancements in retail that we see today. One of those cornerstones, right, or the sort of brick in the foundation of all the supply chain data is this humble UPC barcode, right? It's something we all recognize, going through self-checkout. It's a staple of retail these days. But it is worth noting that that is a 50-year-old technology that still plays a very valuable role in sort of all of our lives. And as you can see around this circle, these are all the use cases that having a standardized data carrier like this UPC barcode, something every point of sale scanner and many other scanners in the retail and supply chain environments are already configured to scan and interpret. And combining that barcode with a globally unique identity, right? So the UPC code or the numbers that are written in that barcode, which are issued by GS1, is, again, a part of how that entire system works. So if I'm passing a can of soup over the register, I feel pretty confident I'm not going to be charged for a washing machine or, hair dryer or some other product. And that's all done because that globally unique identity in the barcode is managed to avoid any duplication. So we have a globally unique identity. All the scanners are configured to read the barcode and pull that in for the price lookup. And that has sort of enabled all of the amazing retail technology that we have today with, in-store pickup, e-commerce delivery. You can make a case that it's all sort of founded on that core technology from about 50 years ago. So just kind of going around, obviously, you've got the checkout scanning, the satisfying beep at point of sale. You've also got the ability to interpret that sales data to do things like demand planning, understand sort of consumer behavior, sales analytics by store, by region, or by product line. And you can use that same barcode and identity for things like fulfillment, inventory management, and also category management from a brand standpoint. How are those numbers that represent these products folded into these different categories? And then how are those performing when we look at sales numbers from point of sale? So for Sunrise 2027, what this program, what this initiative means is to add the ability at point of sale to read a 2D barcode and get the same functionality out of it that you do today with that UPC, right? So you are already seeing a lot of QR codes on product packaging. Many brands and retailers are already including these. But what makes Sunrise 2027 and the work that GS1 is doing a little bit different is we are putting forward a data standard so that you can include that digital product identity anytime you're writing one of these 2D codes. So you have a QR code on the package. Today you can scan that on your mobile device and it takes you to a unique experience on the web, right? Or if you're scanning that with a loyalty app that retailer or brand has put out there, it can derive thousands of different potential experiences. But in order to get the absolute most out of it, it's almost as if we're taking a step back and adding some less intelligent functionality and making it operate as a sort of, let's say a dumb barcode. So I can point a scanner at it, I get that satisfying beep, it pulls out that product ID and does the price lookup exactly as you'd expect it today for the UPC code, right? And that's a very powerful combination. So like I said, 50 years ago, we had unique identity and 1D barcode, right? And today we have that same unique identity, but it's in a more capable, more data rich, and web-enabled QR code that you're going to start to see on packaging. So going around the circle here, obviously you've got access to product information from your smartphone. This helps with regulatory compliance and certification, loyalty programs, again, the consumer engagement we've talked about, recall and traceability, which goes in sort of two different directions. One being, if I have supply chain data in my barcode, I can use that in my store systems to pull out things like a lot code, which I'll talk about later on. That is the sort of source that I would want to look at to understand if this product is subject to a recall. And also in terms of traceability, what information can I access from further upstream, right? So if I have that core identity in the QR code, that's driving my web experience. From a brand standpoint, you can direct that consumer to information about the history of the product. If it's a food item, where it was grown, harvested, rendered, manufactured. And then on sustainability and recycling, similarly, what can I know about this product's construction? What components went in, manufacturing processes, were these sustainable, fair labor practices? Or it's as simple as perhaps this barcode takes me information about how to recycle the packaging, right? What can I do with the cardboard, the plastics? What do I need to separate and what can I combine? So when we are talking about Sunrise 2027, right? As I said earlier, it is about adding additional technology capabilities to retail point of sale, right? So that's why we say sunrise as opposed to sunset. We want to get UPC functionality and the 2D to do that price lookup. But it is not about eliminating the UPC barcode or removing it or giving it any less priority. But that is a future that we will potentially see if adoption of 2D grows and major retailers adopt it as their sort of preferred point of sale barcode. So if we're talking to retailers, it is a bit of an ask to say, all right, how can we add this to your IT roadmap, right? We're adding functionality to those point of sale scanners. We're talking about a global program. So this is enterprise wide. All of those sort of scanning machines that are in scope in all of the stores that are out there sort of across the world. It's a very, very large scope. It can be kind of a daunting task to start with. And from the retailer standpoint, it is often that they're looking at, well, what is the cost of this going to be? So I'll go into in just a moment, what are the steps that we would look for. But to start off with the opportunities that retailers might experience, the primary thing to look at is what can they do with this additional value-added data, right? So today you've got a UPC with just 12 digits. That looks up a price. totally functional, works every time. If you start to add more detailed information, like a serial number, an expiration date, or a lot code, each of those data elements can now drive further business intelligence. They can drive actionable insights. They can drive automation processes. And I'll walk through with each of those sort of how we can make that work. But it is important to note that there is going to be a little bit of a difference in implementation from a retailer that is ready to scan and ingest this data, and let's say national, global, or local brands being able to put this more fine-grained information into their product packaging. So for retailers, there's a lot of opportunities to look at their internal brands, their own brands, right? If they enable 2D scanning at point of sale, or any of the use cases I'm about to walk through, they can drop the UPC from those internal brands as soon as they feel they're capable of reading 2D, right? One of the most compelling opportunities to include any of these data elements, especially expiration date, is with the scanner scales that are in the perimeter of especially a retail grocery store. So you can imagine fresh bread, cut fruit, anything that is prepared in the store and then labeled. Those scanner scales can be configured to print 2D barcodes and include a lot of that extra data you see on the label so that the point of sale scanner can read it automatically. And then it's a mass data collection exercise that drives a lot of additional business process and value. All right, so moving on to the first one. So we're talking about a 2D barcode, which again is capable of holding much more data than just the 12 digits you can see in a UPC. So that makes it possible to add a serial number as one example. And what this does is it makes every single barcode on each of these products completely unique, one of one. So if I bought a, blue size large t-shirt, and then the next week I go in and buy a second one, those UPC codes are going to be exactly the same because they're identifying that item at a high level. If there's an additional serial number, I'll know I've got shirt number 1 and shirt number 25, let's say. And what this enables is the ability to capture that data at point of sale so that you can record the specific item that was checked out by the customer. Now, that may seem like a fairly straightforward process, right? What is the benefit of that? And what it comes down to in terms of value to the retailer is the ability to authenticate returns. So if someone did actually purchase this shirt, they bring it back, you can match that serial number to a sales transaction. In a perfect world, that could also be combined with their use of their either loyalty card or an app. So you can identify who made this purchase, when they made it, and yes, it was this exact product, which is a huge benefit to their ability to prevent stolen goods, returns fraud, and counterfeit merchandise. One thing to point out on here as well, less so in the food space, a little bit more in the apparel and general merchandise space, is if a retailer is already active with RFID, right, which is a wireless inventory management technology, those are usually included inside the same tag or label as the barcode. So RFID requires serialization. That's how you can read wirelessly. Each one has to have a unique identity. So you can sort of pull them in mass data collection wirelessly. If those serial numbers are already available, including that on a 2D barcode is actually not very complicated. So any RFID-enabled retailer for any of those merchandise categories, moving to a requirement for suppliers to put serial number in the barcode opens up this exact use case of returns authentication and diversion of stolen goods. All right, moving to the next one, the expiration date. So similar thing, we've got a 2D barcode on there. Let's use the scanner scale application in the bakery of a retail grocery store. So the label is always going to have expiration date or perhaps sell by date or best by date. One of those pieces of information to know when is the best time to consume this and after what time should I avoid it, right? Any of those data points can be included in the 2D barcode and then digested by their point of sale system. So if we include the expiration date into a QR code, right? Every time we weigh that fresh bread and print out the label, It means that the point of sale system can pull that out and it can be aggregated over time to give that retailer tons of valuable insights about the fresh food stock rotation, right? The sort of, what is the term that I heard recently? Lead and lag data, I think is the term that I heard. So how effectively are we moving the most recent product out of the store? How much of our fresh product is being delayed and sold close to its expiration date, right? How is the performance of the staff in the store in merchandising and stocking high expiry products? Or even potentially, how good are the suppliers that we have in being able to provide within the range of expiration date that's in our agreement with them, right? So again, putting a point of sale system at the center and making that the point of mass data collection, including this data element of expiration date, opens up tons of analytics and data optimization opportunities. So the second bullet point here, this is a little bit more future looking. There was a case study done by our colleagues at GS1 Japan looking at fresh baked items. And what they did is they put the expiration date in the 2D barcode, like I mentioned, and combined that with electronic shelf labels. So the digital shelf labels that can be controlled remotely to show the price and other features. And what they did is they had any item still on the shelf with an expiration date of tomorrow would automatically around 3 p.m. go through a 30% markdown. So they had it all merchandised, so they knew this is expiration by date, 3 o'clock, the price will change on the shelf label. And because you have the expiration date in the barcode, that can be calculated automatically at the point of sale and automate the 30% discount to the customer, right? So if you think about that, you're using automation, you're using data, automated data collection, right, to drive this process, but you're incentivizing your customer or your consumer to actually do your fresh food management on your behalf, right? So potential for additional labor savings and pulling the customer into a marketing campaign or a discount campaign that can be coordinated to make sure that first expired, first out inventory is managed, or for those that are price conscious, instead of reaching all the way to the back to get the freshest, they're shopping based on your expiration date to offer themselves a discount and manage your inventory on your behalf. All right, so the last one that we're going to look at here is we're going to add a lot code into that barcode. So lot codes or a batch code or a batch lot today is one of the most common data elements that's used to process recalls, right? So if you have, again, that unique product ID, we call that a GTIN, Global Trade Item Number. That's what's in the UPC code. That tells us every one of those products that may exist, right? So if I'm selling over-the-counter medication, if I'm going by the GTIN, that's just going to tell me how many I have across the entire landscape of stores. But if you go down to that next level and you're looking at the lot code, that tells you a batch-specific production run, right? So if you are able to have that in the barcode, it means you can capture that anywhere that product is scanned throughout the supply chain. And if that lot code is flagged by the FDA or by some other body to be subject to recall, any of those scanning points can be built in with a diversion process, right? So I've got my fresh made deli sandwich, right? The tomatoes inside are potentially, subject to a recall or a safety concern, or I've got my sushi with the fresh tuna, right? If I'm carrying that lot code forward from the source, which is the requirement for FSMA 204, and I pull that all the way down into the consumer level barcode, it can be scanned at point of sale and either put up a diversion message for the customer, information that an associate is going to help check out your purchases before you leave, or if the store, the warehouse, the distribution center, wherever those products are, knows that this lot code is subject to recall, it's a matter of just scanning the barcodes of all of their available product until they get a match that these are the ones that require recall and all of the other ones are safe. So this is just a third example of we're taking that product ID, putting it in a more advanced data carrier, and just adding one additional data element to drive a whole bunch of additional business value. So from the retail standpoint, those are the primary advantages, right? They're a bit future facing, but this is the retail landscape that we can expect in the not too distant future. So how are we going to make this happen? What retailers are going to need to do in order to get ready for Sunrise 2027 is actually fairly simple, but it's not insignificant, right? First thing that we tell any retailer that's approaching this is to understand their hardware in the store. So those point of sale scanners, perimeter store scanners, handheld devices from their store staff, are they capable of reading 2D barcodes in the first place? If it is an optical scanner, meaning it's camera-based, the functionality is built into the hardware, and then it's just a matter of turning it on. And from what we have seen and our sort of conversations with industry, the majority of hardware out in the field is already capable for this. It's a matter of configuration. So step 2 is firmware and software need to be updated to turn on that 2D reading capability. And then there's a few different rules in the guidance that we provide in terms of, if I see 2 barcodes, which one should I read? Should I prioritize a 2D? Should I start with the UPC? And all of those can be configured in the POS system. And then the third step is making sure that your back-end POS software, or wherever the price lookup is taking place, or wherever the record keeping of the sales takes place, is able to strip out that product ID, which we call the GTIN, from the 2D barcode. So 3 steps, but it's going to vary depending on how each retailer has built their IT stack and sort of put their the different pieces of these systems together. All right, so now if we move on to the brands, we've talked about scanning environments, the retailers, all the additional data in those use cases. When we talk to brands about Sunrise 2027, the value is actually already much more clear because, as I said before, so many products already have QR codes on them that are built around engagement with the consumer, right? So looking at the back of a package, seeing a QR code is not an uncommon process at all, right? So as brands are starting to adopt this, right, what you are going to start to see is the sort of present state of today where you have a UPC barcode, which enables point of sale scanning. There may be a QR code somewhere else on the package, which has what we would sort of call a single use case. This is going to take me to a warranty page or smart label, which will take me to a disclosure about the contents. Perhaps this will take me to a marketing or user story around this product. And then as we get to 2027, you are going to start to see 2D barcodes and UPCs sort of co-located, right? So a QR code in the same area as the UPC code, because now it's ready for any of those point of sale systems to begin scanning and interpreting the data from the 2D as opposed to the QR code. And again, the QR code still has that same functionality as before in providing consumer engagement, taking consumers to those different experiences on the web. And then once we make it through that, say, critical threshold in 2027 of point of sale scanners being able to read and interpret 2D, if a brand knows all of the channels that I'm selling this product through are now 2D capable, they can remove the UPC if they want to. And then the QR code is that primary point of sale barcode. And then we are going to start to seeing that additional expanded data that I talked about before, inclusion of a lot code, of potentially serial numbers or expiration dates, or even things like country of origin or product variants, right? Or even promotion dates. So 2027 is that milestone of, yep, the retail technology is there for 2D, driving the exact same use case of beep at checkout. And then that gives all of the brands and everyone else the security to innovate and move into those higher data new use cases. All right. And again, from the brand standpoint, going to more granular data, lot code, serial number, whatever that looks like, we talked about how that can benefit a retailer in terms of capturing it, but the same is true from a brand standpoint. If you are delivering web content to a consumer from the scan of a product, if that barcode contains the core digital identity of the item, right, that UPC code, that GTIN, and then you get more smaller batch specific. Now I have a lot code. Now I've got an expiration date. That also allows the marketing experience you're delivering to the customer to be that finite as well. So let's say, there's a recall, there's a potential health issue with this particular product. The lot code is there in the barcode. Consumers can be directed to scan that and immediately redirected to a page about the recall or what information they need in order to make sure that their safely disposing or providing information back to FDA around that product. So again, marketing strategy could be lined up with product identity, and the more fine grained that gets, the more you're able to deliver a custom experience to those users that are interacting with your product. All right, and then what are brands expected to do? So we talked about retail readiness, all the configuration of those scanners. This is the most technical slide I will share for sure, but this is an important consideration for any brand moving towards Sunrise 2027. They want that 2D code to be able to drive point of sale. The primary requirement is that for this transition period, the 2D code and the 1D are co-located within a 2-inch perimeter of the center of the UPC. Very technical, I know, but this has come from extensive testing that GS1 has sponsored, and a lot of feedback from those retailers that have been testing and implementing this process. So with an optical point of sale scanner, just imagine a digital camera taking a quick burst of photos. If I pass those two barcodes over the scanner, it says, yep, I'm seeing two of those in the same frame. Now my software can prioritize which one am I going to use for the price lookup. Whereas if I put a UPC on the back and a QR code on the side, they both have the product ID, the scanner can read both. There's the potential that I might double scan and charge the customer twice. So that's why this is the primary thing that brands can do as they're starting to get ready, is understand, how do I format the data to include the product ID, right? GS1 has plenty of documentation, standards, and support for that. But how do I co-locate those so that the scanner configuration retailers do is going to match what they expect to scan when my product crosses that point of sale system? All right, and that is it for my portion. I believe we are ready to move into the Q&A.
Yes, we are. And to start, first of all, thank you both, Ned and Waqqas, for your insight here. Really, really appreciate it. We have a number of questions from the audience. I want to remind everybody to ask them while we have our experts on the line here. I have a couple of backups as well, so if we need to, we can dip into that, but I'd love to get your questions going here. And the first one will start off, you kind of just addressed a little bit, Ned, but Harry asks, is there a guidebook on printing 2D codes, including placement and best practices to prevent/reduce QR code degradation? I'm also wondering too, just from your perspective, if there's any other kind of pain points with the placement that people should know about beyond just that 2-inch, specification you just shared.
Yeah, sure. There's lots of guidance from GS1. I can make sure that there's a link in the follow-up that goes out from this. We have what is called the 2D and Retail Implementation Guideline. It's a bit technical, so if you're one of those technical people, this is the source for you. It shows exactly which barcode types, how the symbology works, what the data structure, all in very incredible detail to make sure that it's done perfectly. And there are a number of other sources from other standards organizations like ISO that show for the point about barcode degradation, right? How to put additional error correction into those 2D codes to add redundant data, so if there's any damaging, scratching, or things like that, they still are capable to be read at those scanners.
Then yeah, Waqqas, anything you would add to that, or? I think you're actually muted right now.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, I think this is Ned's realm, and I think from our standpoint, because it goes back to like the real estate on the labels is very important. So definitely, I think part of that to think about, Ned, is also how to manage that. Right, you don't want to be able to have too much consumption by these codes that you're losing other nutritional information or branding piece. Right? So
Yeah, and actually, just to piggyback on that, it is the feedback we're getting from brands. There's early planning, there's those considerations you can get from our guidelines, but timing this around a packaging refresh cycle is always the right move, because again, shifting different elements, not losing any of that important text on there, that's a big consideration.
So this one's a little bit technical. It's also from Harry, and I'm assuming Ned will be the one to handle this one. But he says, when handling FIFO and LIFO, do you recommend including the lot number and expiry date using GS1 data matrix or GS1 digital link?
Cool. I'm trying to find that one in the chat. There was an acronym in there. I'm not sure. Do you mind reading it again to me?
So yeah, FIFO/LIFO, or first in, first out, or last in, first out.
Gotcha. Yeah, so for Sunrise 2027, both a QR code with GS1 Digital Link, so that's the web URL version, and a data matrix with just the plain text. Both of those are in scope. So retailers that are enabling their point of sale systems will be able to read both of those things. So the preference, right, really depends on a lot of business drivers, right? So if you're putting, let's say at a case level, data matrix might be the better choice because most of the supply chain use cases are configured for a barcode like that, whereas the QR code might be more appropriate for the consumer packaging that'll pass over point of sale, right? But it really does come down to conversations between, let's say, the supplier and the retailer of what they expect to happen. So point of sale systems will be able to pull the G10 out of either of those two barcodes, any of those syntaxes in the barcode. But if you're looking at the fresh food management, there's going to be a lot of weigh-in from the retailer about which barcode symbol they prefer.
We have another question from Susie. I'll throw this one to you, Waqqas, to start. She's asking, are you seeing 2D barcodes being used for restaurant gift cards? And I guess we can expand that a little bit too. Are you seeing them being utilized in the restaurant space in general?
Yeah, no, very, very interesting question. And yes, so the answer is yes, they are being utilized for gift cards or, even prepaid Visa cards that we're noticing a lot of that is being consumed because the 2D barcodes capacity of holding so much information, especially when it comes to, I think one thing I want to call out is the ability to capture like transaction details. So you can actually see beside just the balance on the card, like where was it consumed, what location, etc., and kind of gives people better traceability again from a business standpoint. Hey, this card is being used at this locations, etc., or if there has been a data breach, like hey, at that location, I'm not sure if this card was actually scanned, things like that. I think which parts plays into the improved security side of things. I think what the other piece is that the ability to actually use your mobile devices and mobile payment platform like Square, Clover. You see a lot of those vendors now with mobile, POSs, so not your traditional scanners. So having a QR code on a gift card, or even if it's emailed to you, just showing your phone and having another phone to scan that is a lot faster. So again, another reason why I see adaptability there in the restaurant and retail space.
Yeah, Ned, anything you would want to add to that?
No, I think that's spot on. Yeah.
Well, moving along here, we have a question from Angela, and this seems to be a little bit more supply chain focused, but she asked, does the 2D barcode only go on the retail sales unit, a can of tomatoes, or does it also go on the cases and pallets delivered to the retailer/warehouse in the future? And she also asks how that specifically compares to the GS1 128 encoded barcodes. So maybe we could start with you, Ned.
Yeah, sure. So it's actually, so for Sunrise 2027, that's where the big push is coming. That really does focus on the consumer unit. So that can of tomatoes for sure, right? But the opportunity, right, to get more efficiency out of 2D barcodes where there really is a lot of gains to be made, much of that is actually going to happen in warehousing, logistics, distribution, right, at case level. So whereas we are very focused on getting that retail point of sale technology lifted to read 2D, that's a big milestone to get the whole rest of the use cases driven. 2D codes on case level goods are probably going to become very common as well, right? So the GS1 128 barcode is great because it also has that expansion capability. I can add more data to it, right? But because it's linear, if you start to add all of the necessary data elements, for example, for FSMA 204, you sort of run out of room on the label, or you have to start adding redundant linear codes. Whereas if you want the product ID, expiration date, lot code, and the lot code source reference, so the GLN location number of that original source for the lot code, all of that fits neatly into a 2D data matrix, which takes up a lot less room on the label. So from our standpoint, where we are invited sometimes to weigh in on supplier guides, especially from retailers, there's always how to use the GS1 128. How does this conform with industry standards for, let's say, produce labeling? But wherever we have the opportunity, we're also providing a recommendation for 2D on those case level items.
And just to clarify, would those be different codes then, Ned, or are they the same UPC? Or not UPC 2B to barcode, right? But
sure. Yeah, it depends a little bit on exactly how it's applied. You could put a GTIN on a consumer good, and you could put a GTIN on a case, because I could sell the case. It's a saleable unit. Usually in those barcodes, it's referencing the product that's in the case, though. So the consumer unit item and all the sort of lot codes and other data that's associated.
and yeah, Waqqas, anything you'd like to add, or?
No, I think that you covered that. The last piece was very important. I think it's a good distinction between two different QR codes. Again, the kind of information that can be stored on these are vastly different sometimes. So definitely, I think it's still a valid question, because you're going to be able to capture the whole lot, the whole skid, versus one particular unit, right?
And Angela has another question too. She asks, how do you get all the data into the QR code in the first place? What type of technology is required for a manufacturer to supply all that data so that retailers and consumers can access it? So maybe we could start with you, Waqqas, on how the 2D barcode comes together in the first place.
I think where I would say is the important part here is why are we using this, right? So I think there's definitely the regulatory compliance piece, right? And then the other part is the information that we're getting, how it's being consumed is going to be an important aspect of that. So, Ned, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the ability to put all those data elements into a barcode, format the data, and then write it to the barcode. Many of the sort of label providers, label printing softwares and things, those are generally capable. It's not an issue of creating the barcode, but the one big challenge, I think, that goes across the board is I'll call it the data availability problem. So if I'm producing just a UPC barcode on flat packed cardboard, I can print millions of units. I'm probably not going to change that UPC number. But if I start to move to lot code, which may only be 100,000 units, maybe 1,000, getting that variable information on the packaging on the production line, and then making sure that appropriate lot is packaged inside of those, that is a step change for a lot of the print production and consumer packaging industries, right? So that's where, like I said, scanner scale application, where you're printing one label per item, easy lifts to be able to get that additional data there. But moving a scaled enterprise, like a huge consumer packaged goods company or snack food and beverage, getting a lot code onto things like aluminum cans with variable data, high quality barcodes, that's still a very big challenge. And it's having the right data available at the packaging production line.
Very interesting. I got a couple of other questions of my own here, so I'm going to ask you guys while we have some time. Sure. We talked a lot about some of the advantages to switching over to 2D barcodes. I'm wondering about some of the common pain points for retailers and CPG makers as they're making this transition. I know you were just talking about that a little bit, Ned, but I'm wondering from the retail side, what kind of common pain points do you see when it comes to adopting this technology?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is really getting the right information about what they need to do, right? So that's part of our engagement campaign with these retailers, is clarifying a very simple set of requirements, right? It is technical because you're talking about enterprise level equipment and things like that, but the biggest pain points are definitely configuring those readers to, again, like I said, pull the information out of the 2D code to see two different barcodes on the pack, so a UPC and a QR, and prioritize which one I want to scan. But one of the biggest ones is actually if I see a QR code that doesn't have any supply chain data, it's not a GS1 formatted QR code, it's a more traditional consumer engagement barcode, that I should exclude those from any of the scanning. So I turn my hardware on, great, my hardware now can read 2D. If I don't have all that logic in the back end, I could be mis-scanning any other barcode that's on the package unless I've set up those business rules properly. So it's the ability to do more, but then also put very firm guardrails in place to eliminate any unexpected processes.
Yeah, if I was just kind of chime in a little bit on this as well, Chris, I think from our standpoint, we see something you mentioned, two pieces, right? I think the two prong is the tech integration or the lack of, and the other piece is around data management. I think those two aspects really create a big pain point for a lot of organizations, retail specifically, because the number of SKUs can be just, enormous. So definitely one step is to kind of manage your tech stack in a way it's integrated, or the data flows from one system to the other. If you're using an ERP and you're using a CRM, so these are all core enterprise systems. Are they talking to each other or not? Excuse me. And then the data management in terms of like, is the data cleansed? Is this data reliable? Sometimes what I call stale data, right? So you may have a product information in your supply chain software, but if it's stale, if it's not updated, the lot numbers were not changed, or they have been changed, and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of those pain points need to be considered as we're moving to 2027.
And I guess kind of the same question, but what about on the manufacturer side? Any other common pain points we could talk about for them specifically?
Yeah,
Ned, you want to go first?
Yeah. It's very similar to that last question. It's really moving a QR code so it's near the UPC, that is going to require a packaging refresh. So again, if you want to be ready for 2027, getting that lined up with each of those product lines, each of those individual brands you may be managing, and getting all those packaging sort of refresh cycles timed out properly, that is a challenge. And then looking at that future state where you could have more traceability data with a lot code on, let's say, every bagged salad in the store, right? Getting to that level of more specific identity, more granular data in the barcode at the production speeds of packaging lines today, that's going to be a big challenge for the near future.
Yeah, no, I'll piggyback on that a little bit. I think to me, when you're talking about the manufacturing side, it's the IoT world, right? So Internet of Things, the Industry 4.0, what have you, all those different flavors that needs to be in place to be able to give you that data and able to give you, like, this was the one client we were working with, and they're manufacturing sauces, right? So they have to look at the mixers and what the temperatures were, and then the emulsifiers, all those components, and all those little readings actually play a big role in the whole entire recipe that it eventually gets into a can or a jar, and then on a truck and on a skid. So from a manufacturing standpoint, get all your ducks in a row, get those equipment talking to each other, or at least you have the readability of that data that then feeds into the rest of your core systems. I think that's what I've seen is a big pain point to overcome.
All right, excellent, guys. I know we're running up on the end of the hour here, so I'd see if there's any final thoughts either of you would like to share before we close this one out today.
I'll just say maybe something of 15 seconds. I think as this could be overwhelming sometimes, right? This could be like, hey, I'm a small manufacturer, I'm a mid-sized manufacturer or a retailer. Well, this is a lot of change for me. So I think definitely, first of all, doing a quick assessment of your current state, where your tech stack is, where your processes are, where your people skill set is really important. And kind of align that to your business objectives and goals. Hey, by 2027, we want to be X revenue. We want to be in this much, type of different geography or different customer base. We want to, tap into, or different marketing channels. All those pieces play a big role in creating sort of a rapid roadmap from now to 2027. I would say start off with those 3 or 4 steps to kind of not feel overwhelmed and actually come up with a plan, and then start to kind of piecemeal attack those initiatives. Ned, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I would say that there's a lot of resources from GS1 that we can provide. So again, contact information about after this. We can show you some of the data management elements and the parts that'll make sure that all of these things work in coordination. Brands, retailers, making barcodes and scanning barcodes. But really, people like Waqqas and the companies in the technology space, the solution providers, they're the ones that are actually going to do the hard work of lifting this. So making sure you've got those right partners is always an important piece.
All right, excellent. Ned, Waqqas, thank you so much for your time today. Also, thanks to GS1 US and CBIZ for sponsoring this event. That's going to bring us to the end of today's presentations. I want to thank the audience for sending in so many great questions. Once again, just keep an eye on your inbox for the recording of this webinar and also the slide deck and all the other materials we talked about today. But we'll catch you next time and have a great rest of your day. So thanks again, guys.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ned.
All right. Good.